Okay, so here is what we've learned and here's where we're going. So this is what we have learned. We've done equations that look like this, which are called, I would call it transformation form. And then we talked about these h and k values. So this one is the opposite and the same. And then we've done standard form now, that was yesterday. And if it looks like this, then everything would be opposite. So the h and the k values. And then today we're going to learn a third form of this equation, which now looks completely different. And it's going to be a different method. So now we have 3 different varieties of how I could make the equation look. All right, so this one today is called general form. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And the slope is the a value again, the multiplier of the x squared, which was the same as the last time. So the multiplier in front of the x squared. Okay, what does a tell us again? If a is positive, what do we know? It opens up. If a is negative, it opens down. If a is bigger than 1, what happened to our parabola? Got narrowed. And if a is less than 1, what happens to our shape? It widens. Okay, now the y-intercept. What is the definition of a y-intercept again? Where x equals 0. So looking at this equation, what happens if x is 0? This would disappear. This would disappear. And the result would be the last number here, c. Okay, the vertex, so obviously I have no h's and k's in this formula. We're going to be doing a different method here. Negative b divided by 2a, comma, plug in. All right, so let's see how this is going to work. So here's my first equation. Let's talk about what is a, what is b, what is c. So how many, a is how many x squareds do I have? Negative 1. B is how many x's do I have? So negative 6. And c is how many numbers do I have? Negative 7. Okay, so the vertex is negative b over 2a. So what is the opposite of my b? Positive 6 over 2 times negative 1, which comes out to be what? Negative 3. Then I'm going to plug a negative 3 into the equation. So it's going to look like this. Do you notice how I wrote this? What is the negative of negative 3 squared? I get this 20% get this wrong on the test, doing the math on this. Remember, BEDMAS says, what is negative 3 squared? 9. then times it by a -1. So -9 plus 18, subtract 9, or subtract 7, sorry if I said 9. So that came out to 2. Okay, so negative b over 2a, comma, plug in. That's what we do. The rest of it is all the same. So what's the slope? We decided what's the a value? -1. So what is the parabola going to do? It's going to open like this, down, because the slope is negative. What's the axis of symmetry? What's this cutting line? How do I write that? What does it always start with? X equals, and what number does x go through? What do we cut through? -3. We cut through -3. What's the domain? Same. Always the same. What is it? -infinity to infinity. It goes out both ways. So we look like this. What is the range? What is the lowest height? -infinity up to the highest height of, what's the height of this 2? Okay, you look at the y value for height. And what is the y-intercept? So when x equals 0, what happened to our equation? So remember what happens when you plug in 0, right? Anything that, with x in it would be 0. So you can find it that fast, just -7. It'll always be that last number in this form. Okay, so this is the idea of just what it looks like. I'm just going to do a quick visual here. So -3, 2 would be the vertex. And we're going 1, 1 in a down direction, right? We're going 1 over, 1 down as a slope. Okay, and remember that the y-intercept here is -7, right? Does that connect with everything you're putting together? Okay, number 2. So let's first write down the a, the b, and the c. So the a is how many x squareds you have. So 3. The b is how many x's you have. So 12. And the c is how many numbers you have. Okay, so the vertex, I'm going to do a -b over 2a. So -b would be -12 over 2 times 3. So what does that come out to be? -12 divided by 6, -2. So now that's the x, so I'm going to plug that x in to figure out what the y would be. So 3 times negative 2 squared plus 12 times negative 2 subtract 4. So that's me plugging it in. It's fine if you're plugging it into your calculator, but you would want brackets around the negative 2.
Why is it squared?
Like this?
Yeah.
Because of this. I need
Oh.
to do the x number squared right there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay, and I was getting negative 16 if anybody else got that. That's good, that number. Somebody else typed it in and it came out the same. Okay, the slope is the A number, so that is 3, which tells me the direction that this would open is upward, because 3 is positive. The axis of symmetry cuts it. And when you cut up and down, you have to be x equals. And then which x value would you specifically go through? Negative 2. Domain is left and right, forever, forever, going out, out. So I have a range like this. So there's a minimum. What's the minimum height here? Negative 16. And then it would go upward. So where am I getting the negative 16 from? The y height of the coordinate. And what's the y-intercept? Snap of a finger, you can get that. Negative 4. Because if x was 0, gone, gone, so 0, 0, subtract 4.
Zero will always be like that?
Yep. In this form, but not in the form we did yesterday. Because if once we plugged the 0 in, we had to do a bunch of math, right? I'm just going to be drawing you a simple sketch here. Oops. No, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. I did it wrong. Negative 2, negative 16. So negative 2, negative 16 was the vertex. And I knew the y-intercept. That's what it would kind of look like. You're a little bit skinnier than normal because you're going to be going 1 over and 3 up, right? Because that slope was 3. So I got a little bit skinnier than normal. Okay, we're going to add one more thing to this yet. Okay, next one. How many x squareds do you have? That's always the A. How many x squareds do I have? 1. How many x's? Negative 2. And C is how many numbers? Okay, the y-intercept at the snap of my finger is negative 8. The slope is 1. Okay, this is something that's new. The x-intercepts. What's the definition of an x-intercept? So a y-intercept was when x was 0. So an x-intercept is when y is 0. Okay, this is going to take us back to grade 10. And you're going to say you forgot how to do this. How do I solve an equation like this when there's technically two different variables? This is different. X squareds and x's are different, right? You can't ever combine them. They're different. So you can't do a math called isolation. You can't group something together and isolate it. I'm going to give you a hint. It's the math F word that we have to do.
Foil.
Foil, opposite of foiling, actually, the complete opposite. You're kind of on the right track, but it's the opposite of foiling. You did it last year a bunch of times.
Function?
Factoring.
Factoring. Okay, so factoring and foiling are the different processes of each other. They're the opposite. Factoring. Okay, grade 10, you learned a bunch of styles. I'm going to name them and you can pick which one this is. You learned how to factor with GCFs. Does that ring a bell? You learned something called simple trinomials, complex trinomials, and difference of squares. Do you remember all those names?
DOS.
DOS, yes. Which of those four styles is this one?
Simple.
Simple trinomial. Okay, so that means simple trinomial format was two brackets. The first times the first produced x squared. So what would I put? X times x. The last times the last needed to multiply to -8. At the same time, they needed to add to the middle. So what numbers multiply to -8? 2 and 4. And one of them is negative. Which one should be negative to produce the -2 in the middle? Remember that? Kind of all coming back? So my solution for x is what x number will cause this to be 0? If x was what number would x need to be to make this 0? +4? Or what else in this bracket? -2. Okay. Don't worry, the whole next unit that we do with quadratics is all this stuff. All right. Vertex. So I'm going to do -b over 2a. So we wrote it down up here. What's the opposite? I don't want you to think -b. I want you to say, what's the opposite of RB? We had a -2, so I'm going to write +2 over 2 times 1. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. Okay, now I'm going to do what with that one? Plug it in. So plug it into the equation will give me a -9. Okay, I'm going to plot all the points that I know. So this was my vertex, 1, -9. You told me the y-intercept was -8. That's what we wrote down. And you told me the x-intercepts were at 4 and -2. Will that form a parabola? You see it? You know what you can do? This point will have its partner over there, right? Do you also understand the slope is 1? So this should follow 1, 1, 2 comma 2 over 4 up. Three over 9 up. Is it following all those things, the pattern? Okay, so we did this question because I want you to understand a relationship. Okay, the axis of symmetry would go through the x value of 1, right? What's the relationship of the vertex with its x-intercepts? So here's the x-intercepts and the vertex lines up here. What's the relationship there? Already see a relationship? It's always going to be in the middle. Do you see it? Because of the symmetry, wherever your two x-intercepts are, the vertex will be in line right in the middle of those. So if I knew this was 4 and this was -2, would you be able to figure out the halfway x value? Okay, this example is exactly the same. So let's see if we can do it a little bit faster. A equals 1. How many x squareds do I have? 1. I have 4 x's and I have -12 as a number. Therefore, the y-intercept is -12. The slope is 1. Okay, this is the new thing, the x-intercepts. This is the thing we didn't do yesterday. 0 equals, so I replaced y with 0. And then I need to understand that the math on this can't be solved by isolation. So we have to factor. I gave you another simple trinomial. So what multiplies to the end and adds to the middle is what you're going to be thinking.
4 times 3.
4 times 3 works for 12, but I don't think I can add to 4 with those numbers.
6 times -2.
So 6 times 2 would be able to get me to a 12 multiplication. And how do I get a positive 4?
-2.
Okay, so make sure your numbers multiply to that and add to that. So what are the x-intercepts? 6 and 2. -6, did I say? -6 and 2. Okay, I'm going to graph what I know right now. We're just going to see some stuff here. Okay, so we knew the x-intercepts were at 2 and -6, and we knew the y-intercept was -12. Okay, what x value would match to the vertex? The vertex has to line up halfway between those. What x value would you pick? So if you want, you could just add them together and divide by 2, because that's how you do an average. So what's this plus this divided by 2? Negative 2. Do you see it visually? Negative 2 would slice this thing in half. Okay, so that's what I picked. So the coordinate of the vertex is negative 2 comma what? Now, I will do it the other way just to show you that that's what it is. So negative b over 2a. Negative b over 2a, guess what number it gives us? Negative 2. So you see how it matches all together? So it's in the middle, it's also negative b over 2a. So let's plug this in. So I plugged it into the original, and I got negative 16. So that's where it falls. Look at it all connecting together because it's all making a parabola. And if my slope is 1, it should follow my basic pattern. And does it do that? 1, 1. 2, 4. Do you see all those steps? 3, 9 would be there. 4, 16. This is 4 over 16 up. So it's matching up with all the things that I know from the past. Okay, we need to do one more of these. Because I make you do a different factoring here. Okay, so this one, how many x squareds do I have? 1. How many x's do I have? Negative 16. And how many numbers do I have? 0. So what is the y-intercept? If I don't have any numbers, 0. The slope is 1. Okay, so what are the x-intercepts? This is the one that's different. So if y equals 0, so we learned that we would have to factor. So which style is this? And the last style I gave you was simple trinomial, and that's not this one. It's not a trinomial because there's not 3 parts. So difference of squares or GCF are the 2 that are left. So you're down to a 50-50 multiple choice here. The answer is that it is a GCF. Okay, a GCF says look at all the terms. Is there something you can divide out that's in this term and this term that could come out? You could take an x out. Now, x times what would get me to that x squared? X. X times what would get me that? Does that look familiar? I'm teaching the grade 10s this right now, and I'm making sure they don't forget. Okay, I have two solutions for x. What would I want x to be here to cause 0? What would I want x to be here to cause 0? So this one is probably easier, positive 16. But what would you want here? You would need x to be 0. So here's what you know. You know that you have an x-intercept at 0 and at 16. You know that this is a slope of 1. So it will open up. Could anybody, using some mental math skills here, figure out what the coordinate would be for the vertex? So what is the x value going to have to be on that? Think about your symmetry.
8.
It has to be 8 because it's in the center of 0 and 16. And what is 8 squared minus 16 times 8? That's the plug-in, which is negative 64. Does it also line up with, if you move 8 over, you should have to go 64 up on a normal slope of 1? Does that make sense as well?